Our next spark is titled High Capacity Magazine Bans, Do They Work? By Tim Bessler. Tim is a code monkey, database guru, mechanic, marksman, musician, Krav Maga practitioner, I have no idea what that is, gastronaut, debater, gamer, and all-around problem solver. Tim.
Rampage killings make up less than 1% of gun violence annually, yet when people consider what kinds of ways can we prevent gun violence, that's the first thing they think of. We owe it to the victims of all violence to come up with rational ways to reduce that. Columbine being a prime example. Bans on high-capacity magazines typically are the first thing that come to mind. They've been tried before, and it's a continuum fallacy to look at this. New York recently enacted a 7-round ban. We had a 10-round ban from 94 to 2004. Colorado recently enacted a 15-round ban, but when it takes less than 2 seconds to change the magazine on a firearm with the goal of buying more time for victims to maybe escape or to fight back, it's a facile endeavor. It's unfortunate. The same thing, even since 1966, we've seen it where most mass shooters will bring multiple weapons with them. This is from the University of Texas Tower Sniper. 16 people killed over the course of 90 minutes. Virginia Tech is the deadliest mass shooting at a school in US history, where 30 people were gunned down in the Norris Hall over the course of 11 minutes with almost 200 rounds fired by one shooter. If we were to reduce his magazines in the 2 handguns that he carried from 10 and 15 down to just 10 and 10, he would have taken 6 more seconds to do what he did. Would that have bought more time? He had even not fired half of his rounds. At the Sandy Hook massacre, 26 people were killed, mostly children, with an AR-15 rifle over the course of about 10 minutes, with another, again, around 200 rounds fired. And something else that is of particular note is that of those magazines that he had, the police found some that were more than half full. He also had 3 weapons that he didn't even use. And the concept of reloading before you're empty, which mitigates this reduction, is known as a tactical reload. This is practiced by law enforcement, by the military, professional competition shooters, and even in video games this is trained. You don't refill your gas tank when you're on empty. You do it slightly above. And that was something that this shooter practiced as well, which mitigates that limitation. At the Fort Hood shooting, the shooter was recently sentenced to death. He killed 13 people over the course of 4 minutes and injured 32, firing again over 200 rounds, and was eventually captured by police. His particular weapon, a handgun with a high-capacity magazine, did end up being a factor. It would have increased that 4-minute massacre by 24 seconds, or 10% of the time. He was also immediately confronted by law enforcement as he began his attack, which also had a very critical factor. Now, we've seen this presented before, that these bans will have an effect, not only on mass shootings, but in violence in general. But even when these bans are in effect, they aren't in effect. They don't do anything. The Columbine shooting is a prime example. This occurred during the height of the 1994 ban on both assault weapons and high-capacity magazines. Over half of the rounds fired in this massacre were fired from a gun that accepted only 10-round magazines. The shooters took 45 minutes to kill 13 people and then themselves, and injured 21 more with gunfire, firing nearly 200 rounds. You can see a pattern here. Patterns are the key to solving these problems. We saw 96 rounds fired from the one gun, and most of the fatalities came from shotguns, which don't even hold New York's stringent regulation of 7 rounds, due to the lethality of 12-gauge in close distance versus the 9mm guns that they had in addition, 2 weapons per shooter, in addition to pipe bombs, which thankfully had no effect due to their failure. If we reduced those magazine capacities, the majority of the rounds fired would not have even been affected. So you're looking at almost 500 rounds here between all these magazines in this picture, which is double what's usually fired in these massacres. And when these reloads take only seconds, and the shooter can have as many magazines as he wants, but police and other defenders can't, it's irrelevant. Even the most common pump shotgun in America, the Remington 870, was recently used to deadly effect in the 4th deadliest workplace shooting at the Washington Navy Yard. So we owe it to the victims again to say, when the most common crime guns in America don't even hold this many rounds? They're small and concealable, or they're the most common revolvers and shotguns. How can we reduce gun violence? If we want to reduce gun violence, we need to look not at the instruments of gun violence, but the causes and the correlations with gun violence. Chicago suffers, on average, 2.5 equivalent Aurora Theater massacres every month, based on the rate last year. And we need to look at those correlations, which are domestic violence, gang activity, mental illness, and poverty. Thank you.
There are no simple answers.